I just recently finished the lap 3 mod for Pizza Tower and I can safely say that I will never be the same again. No matter how much pain I went through though, one thing's for sure, most of these levels were really difficult. But exactly how difficult were they? That's the question I'll try to answer in this video as I rank every lap 3 in Pizza Tower from easiest to hardest. Oregano Desert and Fastfood Saloon are tied for me in terms of the easiest lap 3 in the game. They both mainly consist of holding forward and a couple of loose turns with absolutely zero risk of getting caught for at least 90% of the level. If I had to choose, I'd probably say Oregano Desert is slightly harder because there's at least one part where you kinda have to stall Pizza Face a bit or else you'll die. Refrigerator, Refrigerador, Freezerator is a slight step up from the previous two levels, having a lot of pits you can easily fall into if you're not paying attention. This doesn't really affect its overall difficulty though, as aside from a semi-challenging super jump in the very first room, this level is literally just a sprint to the finish with basically zero places in which you could get caught. Unfortunately, the funny FNAF level also has one of the easiest lap 3s in the game. This entire escape sequence is extremely straightforward with zero bends or turns which you could get caught. The only reason this level isn't at the bottom of this list is because of the animatronics, which are basically an instant death if you run into one. They're still really easy to deal with thanks to the gun though, so overall this level is pretty free. Pig City is a similar level of difficulty to the previous levels with one caveat. This level introduces a pretty big problem when it comes to lap 3, Gustavo and Brick. Gustavo and Brick are a force to be reckoned with when it comes to plowing through enemies, but this comes at a cost of their top speed, with them only being able to run as fast as Mach 3 for Peppino. This slower speed and equally slow acceleration makes him a prime target for Pizza Face, who heavily punishes their slow turning speed with death. Luckily, their part in Pig City is just a straight line with only a couple small turns and plenty of space to build distance between them and Pizza Face. After Gustavo and Brick's section, you just have to make this really easy jump out of the taxi that I definitely didn't die on multiple times and you're home free. John Gutter is the first level of Pizza Tower, and as such it has one of the easiest escapes in the game, with most of it just being running in a straight line. However, this one section is what elevates this level from being an absolute snooze fest to a legitimate challenge. You have to make 3 tight turns in this section, one at the very top, one in the middle into this small gap, and a final one after that to fall off this ledge. You then have to quickly come to a stop above this ladder, climb down, dash just the right distance so you fall down this gap instead of hitting the wall, and finally press down when you hit this pizza box. If you are like me and try to lap through this level first, you're gonna have a hard time, but after enough practice this section will become muscle memory and you'll be able to beat it every time. Pizzascape is a slight step up from John Gutter, but is still a similar level of difficulty for the most part. The hardest part of this level is definitely the very start of the third lap, where in order to get out of this room you have to make multiple tight turns, rolls, and a final jump into the door, all the while Pizza Face is breathing down your spine. After that challenge, the level is basically over as long as you don't make any dumb mistakes. Pizzascare is another pretty straightforward sprint to the finish with 3 real parts of note. The first is this part where after sliding through this gap you have to immediately drop straight down and dash to the right. The next one is this long vertical corridor that you actually have to super jump up. This is pretty easy to do as long as you jump over this guy that turns you into a ball. Finally, there's this really close call with Pizza Face near the end of the level. I luckily never died here, so I'm not sure how tight the timing actually is, but as long as you make the turn quickly, you'll probably be fine. Yar, me mateys, in this segment we'll be talking about Crust Cove. Yeah, there's not really much to talk about here. This first segment messed me up a couple times, and this part with the cannon's pretty challenging, but other than that, this level's pretty standard. Just make sure you don't choke at the ending like I almost did. Golf immediately hits you with a pretty hard challenge, with it requiring you to juke Pizza Face several times in these small areas in order to get to this door. These guys who usually throw you into a ball are removed on lap 3 to make this easier, but this actually indirectly adds another layer of difficulty. Usually on the first 2 laps you can practice the route for some of the harder parts of the level so that you have a better chance of pulling them off with Pizza Face chasing you. However, these guys are only removed in lap 3, so you essentially only get 1 chance at practicing the section instead of 3. Luckily the level's basically just a straight shot to the finish after this, but this problem of lap 3 exclusively adding or removing things will spell trouble for some of the later levels. The next level we'll be talking about is Fun Farm, and oh my god, is that Martha Chicken from the hit PS1 game Martha Chicken? Sorry about that. Anyways, this level isn't that bad. The only hard part is this one section halfway through the escape where you have to loose Mort, lure Pizza Face upwards, and then barely slip by him twice. After that, and a small heart attack is basically over. Honestly, the worst part about this level is that every attempt you have to hurt Mort In theory, Bloodsauce Dungeon seems like it would be the hardest level to lap 3 ever. The level's entirely made of twisting vertical pathways, stage hazards that slow you down, and some really unfair enemy placement. However, despite all these elements, the lap 3 is still pretty manageable, with some of the harder parts being saved by having space at the start of the room where you can build some distance from Pizza Vase. The level's definitely not easy though, and there are still several sections that will get your cheeks clenched, especially towards the end. Oh shit! This level's absolute doo-doo. As soon as lap 3 starts, you have to run left up this wall and go into a door at the top. Sounds simple, right? Well, apparently not, because I swear I messed this part up half the time and had to take a walk of shame just to get back to where I was supposed to go. Anyways, after that we're introduced to the absolute bane of my existence, these pipes. Each of these pipes play an unskippable animation before they spit you out, during which you can still get caught by Pizza Vase. This actually made the level impossible in previous versions of the mod because you'd always get caught in this final pipes animation, but thankfully they shortened it so it's possible now. Combine these pipes being absolutely everywhere with a bunch of tight turns and maze-like level design, you have a recipe for death at every corner. If you're trying to complete every lap 3 in order, Ancient Cheese is the fattest difficulty spike known to man. The very first room after the pizza portal presents a problem. Normally at this part in the level you would super jump up to this small corridor and jump on these platforms to make your way to the top. However, with Pizza Vase chasing you, it's impossible to super jump up in time before getting caught, instead requiring you to take this stupid double jump that I must have failed at least a couple dozen times. This is only the beginning though, as after emerging from the pizza box you have to immediately dash to the left towards these cheese platforms. If you take the normal route, Pizza Face will intercept you after you turn, so you have to turn early and just pray that you can barely squeeze by. After another close call and a stupidly tight super jump, you finally pass the hard part of this level. That doesn't mean you can rest though, as the rest of the lap is still pretty tight with little room for error. If you're able to keep your nerves under control though, you'll be able to run the remaining distance and close out the lap. Let's just get this out of the way. Anyways, this level marks the return of our favorite duo, Gustavo and Brick. If you thought their first level was too easy, you're in for a nasty surprise, because this level is where their limitations become very apparent. Gustavo and Brick's poor acceleration and limited options for movement work perfectly fine with their slower paced stages, but when you have to outrun an ever approaching Pizza Face, it definitely becomes a problem. The first room alone showcases this fact. If you were Peppino here, you'd easily be able to blast through this section in half the time as Gustavo and Brick, likely never even coming close to dying. But since you're playing as a duo here, you're constantly tailed by Pizza Face and forced to make multiple close dodges. Things don't get any easier in the next couple of rooms, as here you have to quickly ascend this winding pathway before making an extremely narrow dodge that honestly doesn't even look possible. I mean, Gustavo is literally inside Pizza Face right now, this is ridiculous. Luckily after here there isn't much left to go and the rest of the lap is pretty easy. Like, you'd have to be really bad to die here. Deep Dish 9 is my favorite level in the entire game. Both of the level's gimmicks, the olive and the rocket, are super fun, the level design is great, and on top of all that, the music is banging. The level's lap 3 is also my favorite in the game thanks to its balance of difficulty and playability. The lap 3 starts out pretty simple with a couple tight turns but nothing too difficult. It's not until halfway through the lap that the difficulty starts to ramp up a lot with this section. You have to drop down quickly onto this rocket, jump out of it right into this gap so you maintain your speed, and then dive into this teleporter. Then when you emerge from the teleporter, you have to immediately take a massive blind jump onto this olive bubble. This jump is deceptively hard, and if you miss it, it's a guaranteed death. After that, you just have to bounce on the ceiling a little bit before falling into the door. The next room is equally difficult, requiring you to quickly drop down until you reach this section. Usually you'd have to do a puzzle involving pressing this button a couple of times, but that would take way too long, so instead we just slide right under it. After that, there's just a couple easy turns that I definitely didn't die on and the level's over. Alright, I'm probably a bit biased on this one, but I think Wasteyard was genuinely one of the hardest levels I had to beat in this challenge. Probably the most frustrating part of this level wasn't even the third lap, but the path to get there. The level itself isn't that long, only taking about 2 minutes to reach the pillar, but the escape sequence is one of my least favorites in the entire game. For a good chunk of laps 1 and 2, you're forced to use the ghost power up, which slows down gameplay to a crawl as you have to slowly fly around maze-like rooms. Then to make matters worse, once you get to lap 3, you'll notice that it's pretty much completely changed from the previous laps. Aside from having to take different routes to dodge Pizza Vase, lap 3 also removes the ghost transformation near the end of the level, instead requiring you to take a really tight route as Peppino in order to make it out of the room. Normally I'd much prefer to play as Peppino rather than a transformation, but since this section is only in the very last lap of an already challenging level, it just becomes frustrating. Also, I died twice on the very last screen and I'm still mad about it, so that definitely doesn't help. Peppibot Factory is absolute hell to lap 3. First of all, the pizza box transformation is completely absent from the third lap. This was likely done in order to make certain sections possible, but by doing this, the creators of this mod indirectly made every section in this level a million times harder. The difficulty of this level really becomes apparent during this part about halfway through the third lap. As a pizza box, Peppina is easily able to fly from one end of the conveyor belt to the other with literally zero effort. Without the pizza box, you're instead forced to run on the conveyor belt, which is conveniently covered with electrical plugs that hit you backwards straight into Pizza Face. There are 3 of these conveyors, each spanning the entire length of the room, and at the end of each you have to quickly fall down to the next level without hitting the wall. That's not the end of the conveyor belts though, as immediately after the final plug conveyor you have to juke Pizza Face and then drop down onto another conveyor belt, this time covered in boosters that also send you flying backwards. This conveyor belt's even worse though, as the boosters are super close together, requiring some precise dives in order to weave through them and get to the other side. The next section's a room with multiple levels of Peppibots. Normally you would stop and fight each level of enemies before descending, but since Pizza Face is right there, you kinda just have to plow through and pray you don't get hit. After you reach the bottom and escape the room, there's only one challenge left, the final corridor. I don't even have to explain why this is hard, just look at it. Come on, please. Yes! Yes! Imagine getting through all the previous rooms and having to do that. This final section's truly the ultimate stress test, but if you can manage to pass it, you've beaten the hardest lap 3 in the entire game. But wait, that was only 18 levels. What could possibly be harder than Peppibot Factory? Oh no. Let me break down what makes War so hard to lap 3. First of all, the level itself has one of, if not the most challenging layouts in the entire game. There are several sections that require you to run across an entire room only to immediately do a 180 and run the opposite direction right towards Pizza Face. You then have to narrowly dodge with pretty much zero room for error. There are also several parts where you have to intentionally slow down in order to let Pizza Face catch up to you, only to then slip by him at the last second. Add on to these a bunch of other sections that are just really difficult to get through fast, and you can see why this level is so hard to navigate, especially on lap 3. Another thing that adds to this level's difficulty is its length. Since each lap spans the entire level, War's lap 3 is the longest in the game by far, lasting more than 2 minutes just by itself. What makes this even worse is that most of my fails happened at the very end of the third lap, meaning that I would have to play for up to 6 minutes every attempt just to get one shot at beating the level. However, what's by far the worst part of this level is the timer. On a normal playthrough, 7.5 minutes is more than enough time to beat War, even if you're going for a P rank. However, if you add a third lap into the equation, 7.5 minutes goes from all the time in the world to the tightest time limit I've ever dealt with in my entire life. Even without P rank, you'll probably only be finishing the level with around 30 to 40 seconds to spare. With P rank though, you'll need absolute perfection. Getting every secret and treasure in this level adds around 30 seconds to your time, leaving literally no room for error. You have to take every shortcut, every optimization, every time save, no matter how small, if you even want a chance at lap 3 P ranking this level. For any other level, getting P rank and lap 3 just makes it more annoying, making each attempt longer but not really adding any difficulty. But with War, this extra challenge makes the level go from the hardest lap 3 in the game to something that's not even comparable in terms of difficulty to the other levels. No matter how you look at it, War is the ultimate challenge of lap 3, the culmination of hours of practice, determination, and dedication to a goal. It took me hours of constant grinding over several weeks before I was able to beat this level with both lap 3 and P rank, and I can safely say it was the hardest but most rewarding thing I've ever done in a game. If you like Pizza Tower, I really encourage you to try lap 3 at least one of these levels. It's honestly a great way to add replay value to this already great game, and I think you all will enjoy it. Well, that's 100 hours of my life that I'm never getting back.